All right, good afternoon, everyone, and happy National Caregivers Month. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Chris Kealey. I'm with the Mass Business Roundtable, which is a proud co-founder of the Massachusetts Caregiver Coalition, along with some amazing leaders at SeniorLink and the Mass Tech Collaborative and Archangels, EMD Serono, Cigna Health, Care.com, the Executive Office of Elder Affairs, and so many more of you who are joining us today. Thank you for being part of this group. We appreciate your support. We hope you who haven't joined the coalition, we hope you will join our coalition, and we'll be giving information about how to do that throughout the webinar today. As we continue our advocacy for family caregivers, and we continue to collaborate with Governor Baker's team to make Massachusetts the most age-friendly state in the nation. A couple of things before we get started here. Just a couple of quick announcements. This webinar is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube, and we'll share those links with you in the chat function. Everyone but the speakers will have their cameras off and their microphones muted. So please use the Q&A feature to ask a question. You can do so either anonymously or you can drop a question into the chat function, and we'll try to get to that during our conversation with our amazing panelists today. We also hope for those of you who are on Twitter will join the discussion using the hashtag supporting caregivers. So hashtag supporting caregivers. And now it's my pleasure to get the program started today. The Business Roundtable, for those of you who don't know, is a public policy organization comprised of CEOs and senior business leaders from major employers in every industry sector all across Massachusetts. Our members are committed to the well-being of their employees, especially during these difficult times. And we're thrilled to have one of our leaders, a member of our executive committee, Mark Butler, president of Cigna Health New England, a caregiver himself for his dad, and one of the instrumental founding members of this coalition to kick off this amazing program. So I now pleased to welcome Mark, and please get us started, Mark.
Thank you very much for that nice introduction. I appreciate it very much. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for attending today's session. We think over the next hour and a half, we're going to have some very interesting stories, very compassionate people who believe very strongly about trying to help solve and make aware the different programs and techniques that they're using to address the caregiver crisis in America. Excuse me. Just about 1 year ago today, we launched the Massachusetts Caregiving Coalition that Chris referenced in his comments. We were in a standing room only room. We were trying to build a charter because we knew that there was a real need inside of the Commonwealth and really across America to help those that are providing care with support services and sometimes just the ability to tell their story to someone. We started with a real clear data set. The data set today suggests that there's 53 million unpaid caregivers in the country. So if you stop and think about that for each of you who may be involved in one of these situations, think about there's 53 million other people that are providing, in some cases, up to 24 hours a week of unpaid care for a friend, a family member, or in many cases, elderly parents. These caregivers, as we think about it, are our employees, they're our colleagues, they're our neighbors, they're in our communities. But oftentimes we just see them in the situation that we are actually involved with them in. We don't view them or think about some of the strains and stresses that they may be encountering outside of the normal workplace or in community activities that we're involved with. When we founded the coalition, the goal was really simple. It was really to assess and address the needs of unpaid caregivers, and first and foremost, bring the issue to the forefront so that more employers like yourselves and more organizations across our country began to realize that we have a real significant issue developing that affects all of us. As Chris mentioned in his opening comments, there's really been some true driving forces inside the coalition. And at the expense of repeating their names again, I want everyone to know that their sort of relentless passion to bring this forward and find solutions for people has really been impressive over the last year. As Chris mentioned, I'm fortunate enough to be president of Cigna Healthcare in New England. We were one of the founding members. And certainly when we think about the health and well-being of all individuals that we serve, caregiving is at the forefront of our thoughts always. But I'd specifically like to recognize again our corporate partners, which are Senior Link, Archangels, Care.com, EMD Serono. And then this doesn't work if we don't have the commitment of many state agencies inside of the Commonwealth here. So specifically, I'd like to mention the Massachusetts Executive Office of Elder Affairs, the Massachusetts eHealth Institute of the Mass Tech Collaborative, and last but not least, as Chris humbly stated at the beginning, the Massachusetts Business Roundtable. They have really been the connecting force that's brought these companies together, that has brought this mission together, and through their collective voice, both here in the Commonwealth, across the country, we feel we can make a real difference when we think about raising awareness and bringing solutions to caregiving. We had very high hopes when we started 2020. Our intent was to have a number of what I would call personal contact meetings with all of you as employers. But around March 15th, as we all know, the world suddenly changed. And certainly for us in the Commonwealth, our world changed very significantly given the intensity of the pandemic impact. I'm very proud of what this organization did. Rather than say, well, we're not going to be able to drive this message because of the pandemic, we very quickly pivoted to a virtual format because the need was still clear here that caregiving wasn't going to become less of an issue inside the pandemic. It was only going to increase. And for those of you that are now balancing multiple jobs inside of your family, maybe have children home that you're homeschooling, both on a virtual basis and a home basis, or for those of you that have elderly parents, which you may not be able to get to and see as frequently, the caregiving stress and strain really has only become more significant. Today's our 5th webinar. We're very excited about this. We spent the first 4 webinars that we've done with each of you, and if you have a new attendee, we'll catch you up on that today. But first 4 webinars are really focused on awareness and tools that were available, resources that were available to help caregivers, and more importantly, to begin to really raise awareness about the importance of an overall strategy inside of each of your organizations. There's going to be a tremendous mental health impact when we think about the health and well-being of our employees and our neighbors and our communities, given the pandemic, and that impact is only going to hurt caregivers and affect them more dramatically than before the pandemic. So today we're going to hear from organizations of all sizes. There's large organizations, smaller organizations, but what I hope happens is that their stories and their approaches will inspire each of you that if you haven't taken a step to join the coalition, that you'll certainly consider it. And if you don't have the ability to join the coalition, I certainly hope you'll consider putting together a strategy which is going to help provide flexibility and relief to those many folks in your organization that are involved with caregiving duties. With that, I'd like to introduce our 2 very, very compassionate speakers. If they could turn their cameras on now, Richard and Jasmine, I'd appreciate that. Very good, and I'll just do a quick introduction. Richard Louie joined us today from MSNBC, and Jasmine Greenamyer joins us from EMD Serono, which, as Chris pointed out, has been a very, very important member of the coalition and certainly one of the founding members. Up first will be Richard, who's a thought leader in the intersection of media, social impact, and storytelling. Currently, he's a journalist and news anchor for MSNBC, and he's the director of a new documentary called Sky Blossom: Diaries of the Next Greatest Generation, which is a very raw and candid look at the millions of teens and millennials caring for injured veterans and service members in homes across America. We will put the link to this site up on the chat room so you can see that. Richard, I want to thank you for being here today. One of our key sponsors, as I mentioned, has been EMD Serono. They've been a founding member of the Caregiver Coalition, and we're very happy to have Jasmine Greenamyer, Vice President and Head of Global Strategic Partnerships for EMD Serono, to share her brand new data and insights from the company surveyed of unpaid caregivers across the United States. So as we think about this, we know there's an issue, but what EMD has really helped us do through their survey work is really bring data and analytics to this coalition so that we're able to focus on the right issues. And we hope that you'll find it very helpful as you think about it inside your own organization. This data is a continuation of the company's global commitment to support caregivers through its Embracing Careers initiative. And as I mentioned, we really wouldn't be here today or have the foundation here today to accelerate this work without them. So as I get ready to turn this over to Richard, just a quick story, which many of you know. Richard and I have something in common. We're both caregivers. Myself personally, I take care of my 90-year-old father, who lives about 3 hours, I should say, from me. We have to do it through FaceTiming, texting, and we've had to find ways to be very creative here during the pandemic. So for those of you that still have a parent that is healthy, or those that you may have a parent who is not as healthy, you certainly still know how fortunate we are to have them. So with that, I'll thank everyone for attending today and investing your time with us. Richard, I'd like to turn it over to you, and thanks very much to both of you for being here today.
Mark, thank you so much, and for sharing your personal story. I know that in my discussions with your teammates at Cigna that you walk the talk when it comes to caregiving, and it's great to sit here at the round table to share mutual interests and mutual plans to address the dynamic of family caregivers, especially during this month, being National Family Caregivers Month. Yeah, I do walk a similar walk and journey as Mark has shared, as probably many on this call do. And as a journalist, you know, one of the tough things for me, and sharing a little bit of my story, is, you know, it's an 8-day a week job. And about 7 years ago, when my father was 8 years now, when he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I knew that, you know, I would have to plan if I wanted to be part of his life. And I did. So I, you know, living in New York and my dad living in California, had to make the decision of, you know, to leave my job. And so I walked into my boss's office to let her know that, you know, my father has Alzheimer's and I want to be part of his life and caring for him. And I knew it was very potentially the end of a long journey for my career, because we don't have part-time news anchors. But guess what she says to me? And Jasmine, you've heard the story before. My boss says to me, "I'm a long-distance caregiver too, Richard. I'm caring for my mother in Florida." And I said, "Well, I got you one beat, because mine's farther away." And we joked and we laughed. And so began my part-time job as a news anchor. And I worked Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And she created this for me. She created something that wasn't new. I have, from that time, now been traveling about 250 to 500,000 miles a year, up until recently, for the reasons we all understand, to help with my father and help with my mother. And we've had some times where we thought we were going to lose him because of the common dynamic that, unfortunately, Alzheimer's causes upon those who have it, where he has forgotten how to swallow and forgotten how to eat and forgotten how to walk and forgotten how to talk. Yet he is still with us. He still brings all of his kids different gifts in different ways, which we didn't know we had in us, to be honest. We're still learning. That led me, because I knew I got no training, certainly not, and no pay for doing this, but, you know, I don't want to be paid necessarily, but I did want to learn how to be better at it. And as I shared my journey with others, I learned that, as was said, there are over 50 million that are like this, that, you know, represent $500 billion in economic value annually. That's a big number. And that led me to want to, we just did the world premiere of the film Sky Blossom, which follows 5 student caregivers aged 11 to 26. And the reason why we focused on the film on young caregivers is because of that amazing energy and inspiration they provide to me and to others. And one of the takeaways that I got from it, now that I've been talking about it in different interviews about the film, is I'm not a filmmaker. I'm a guy who wants to get the word out on caregiving. And that's really, because I didn't want to become a filmmaker. That was not the goal. And the fact that Variety recognized it as a top contender for this award season, that was really gratifying. I think it's gratifying for a lot of us on this call because they are my partners in this film. Jasmine happens to be on screen. EMD Serono leaned in. SeniorLink leaned in. And in big ways, consistently. Mary Gallagher, Tom Riley, who've been there from the very beginning, and I know a part of the roundtable, and is why I get to join you today, are part of that. Cigna, Mark, your team is also leaning in on it now, too. We're in discussions at the moment because we know that the story of caregivers is not well known or understood. We say it, it's a funny word. Even us caregivers don't like to use it necessarily or don't know quite what it may mean, but it is the word. And so I think film puts it up on that screen that says it is meaningful to our culture. It is relevant to our culture when we can put it up on the silver screen. And so we begin with the film showing it across the country. We had the world premiere at the Kennedy Center. It's the first ever in its 5 decades that has ever had a drive-in. And it was sitting there right on the main plaza. And we had the searchlights, we had the hoopla, we had flags. It was really something else. And guess what? We also got bipartisan support. So Leader Pelosi and Leader McConnell both signed on as official co-chairs, honorary co-chairs to the film. And the question might be, when do you get the two sides together? Well, when it comes to caregiving, that happened. And Jasmine, that's enough about me, as they say. You and EMD Serono have been a partner for the film for a good 1.5 years now. And I know that when we think about the CARES initiative, that was something that I was speaking with your organization also over the last 1.5 years as you implement that campaign globally. And you also have a new study, and I know you're about to get into that. So I will yield the floor to you in our discussion today.
Well, very kind of you, Richard. We've been huge fans of your passion project, which has been immensely personal, but it's been an immense contribution to the community. And so it's awesome to actually share the stage with you today. So thank you.
Yeah, no, go blue.
Right, Wolverines. Got two
Yes.
Michiganders here. Here's Michigan. That aside, well, thank you. And I really also want to make sure to thank Chris and Laurance and the Greater Massachusetts Caregiver Coalition for this opportunity today to share our timely research with you. And for those of you not familiar with EMD Serono, we're a global healthcare organization, and outside the US, we operate as Merck KGaA Darmstadt, but we have locations in both the North and the South Shore of the Greater Boston area. And as previously alluded to, we're a very proud founding member of this coalition. Next slide, Elizabeth. So I oversee both our Embracing Cares and Healthy Women, Healthy Economies global initiative alongside my partner, Elizabeth Folan. And both initiatives highlight the unique need of caregivers. And obviously being very cognizant of this current moment in time, COVID-19 has just increased the urgency of supporting caregivers, particularly as we look at the implications of their overall well-being and also the implications to their economic stability. So we first launched Embracing Cares in 2017, and we work with 9 leading global caregiver organizations. In the US, that's the National Alliance for Caregiving and the Caregiver Action Network. But we also support oncology and MS patient organizations like the American Cancer Society, Can Do MS, and the Bladder Cancer Advocacy Network. And I always say it's in our DNA as a healthcare company to acknowledge and fully understand how crucial caregivers are. But above and beyond that, we know that there's huge unmet needs, and we're in the middle of a public health crisis. Next slide, please. So this is where I want to start to just talk about the survey results that we just debuted actually yesterday. And we did this survey in collaboration with our Embracing Cares partners. We co-created the survey and launched it this past September. And in the US, we got our representative sample of 750 Americans. And we specifically surveyed caregivers that are unpaid and they're caring for their loved ones with health conditions to learn how the pandemic has specifically impacted them. So overall, the study showed that COVID-19 has increased demands and pressures on unpaid caregivers, which is no surprise. But what was surprising is the amount of time and the percentage of Americans caring for loved ones has significantly increased. And it will not surprise you either that the impact of the pandemic has been particularly stark for women and for communities of color. And we'll get into that more in a bit. I think you'll also find it interesting that 72% of caregivers reported feeling more burnt out than ever before. And I think Richard will particularly appreciate this, that the group that expressed the highest distress at 80% was actually Gen Z and millennials. So while caregivers overall reported increasing their time spent, employed caregivers are actually being hit harder. We saw that employed caregivers are now averaging 26.6 hours per week providing care, and an increase of 8.8 hours since before the pandemic. So as Richard also alluded to, this is more than a part-time job, and we saw an increase of over a day spent on caregiving. Also, employed caregivers are overwhelmingly concerned about their ability to continue to work and to give care. Specifically, 67% expressed concern about being able to continue to work from home, and 56% are concerned about the time commitment needed to provide care will cause them to lose their job. Next slide, Elizabeth. So there's a lot of information on this slide. But what I want to draw your attention to here is that about half of caregivers, over half of caregivers in the US say that the pandemic has worsened their financial health and economic instability is a concerning cause. So moreover for us, among caregivers whose financial health is worsened, about just under 20% say as a result of having to decrease their paid working hours due to their caregiving responsibilities. Next slide. So while all caregivers are feeling the toll of COVID-19 in their lives, women are disproportionately being affected. Women report spending more time on caregiving, but you'll see here they also expressed desiring more support from private and public support organizations, more so than men. So it's common that even before the pandemic, women were more likely than men to be spending time on caregiving responsibilities, and that time commitment has only increased because of the pandemic. We wanted to note that a quarter of women caregiving are now spending an average of 41 hours a week on caregiving. That's the equivalent of a whole second-time full-time job. And again, this is 1 in 4 women. So exacerbating these issues is the fact that women caregivers are significantly more likely to be low income compared to their male counterparts, and making the additional desire for financial tools and services even more dire. So for example, 56% of women reported a household income of below $50,000 per year before taxes, compared to 36% of men. Next slide. So in this slide, what we wanted to do is start to bridge to possible public and private sector solutions in advancing that improved access to care, more overall well-being, and financial tools and employer accommodations could particularly assist women And I always say that, frankly, when you help women, you're helping everyone. When we highlight communities of color, you'll see similar options raised, and in some cases with even higher percentages. Next slide. So let's transition now from talking about women to communities of color and the expressed immense strain that they surfaced in the survey. The negative financial impacts of the pandemic, have been felt by those communities, with close to 30% in reporting that their financial health is worsened as a result of the pandemic, reporting that their salaries were reduced. And it was by a 2-to-1 ratio from communities of color to their white counterparts. And furthermore, just under half admitted that the pandemic has made them reconsider even having children. And the reason we highlighted this is that they're obviously very concerned about their futures. Next slide, please. So we see in multiple categories that caregivers of color have heightened anxiety about the pandemic, from fears about the virus itself to the long-term impact on their lives. And when it comes to employment, caregivers within racial ethnic minorities are especially cognizant of the very important need for caregiver-friendly workplaces. And you may remember that women express this as well. Next slide. So let's step back now and talk about the opportunities, right, across all the sectors where we can better support caregivers. You'll see that the top 3 sectors here that are identified are, first, social services, second, employers, and third, the government. And I'd like to emphasize the element highlighted under social services with a desire for more overall well-being resources. There's a joke that in DC, we always say it's the economy. And within caregivers, I'd like to say it's well-being, it's mental health. We didn't go into it a lot in this presentation, but we consistently see an increased feeling of isolation and distress amongst caregivers. And a statistic that really gave me pause is that we saw that the majority of caregivers said, I know it would be really helpful for me to talk to someone, but actually only 15% said that they're doing this. And even more staggering was to see that 1/3 felt that they had no one to go to. Next slide. So before we talk, go into the path to possible solutions, I just thought this quote was arresting. See us, hear us, care about our stories and our pain. Next slide. So while we firmly believe that the caregiver crisis is a multi-sector opportunity, for the purposes of this presentation, I wanted to focus on employer interventions. We believe minimally employers should be considering, developing support programs for employees where caregivers can have peer-to-peer support, minimally enacting benefits such as the flexible working hours, paid family medical leave, telework options, and I would also say enacting consistent hours for hourly workers. And also, creating the culture of caregiving. What Richard talked about, his very fortunate situation with his boss. But this involves, identifying internal champions who can advocate for caregivers within the company, having trainings to management to understand the unique needs, but also celebrating the unique skills and talents the caregivers bring to the workplace. We know they're immense multitaskers. Next slide. And I wanted to end to make sure that you understand that this isn't something we just talk about externally. At EMD Serono, we are trying to walk the talk internally, and it has been supported at the very top with our CEO. And Elizabeth, if you can go to the last slide. I just want to fully recognize that it took a village to lift this survey. We alluded to the US results that just came out on Wednesday, but in January, we'll be releasing a 12-country survey. We contrast, EU, APEC, North America, and a whole collective battery to see where other countries may have best practices. With that said, I'm going to turn it back to open up the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, both Jasmine and Richard. That was terrific. We do have a couple of questions that have come in from the audience. So one of the first questions, and you touched on it a little bit, Jasmine, but I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on this, was how do you start the conversation with your employer about your caregiving duties? I think that's a daunting conversation for an employee to start. So maybe give us your take on that.
Well, I think Richard, alluded to, hopefully you have a warm relationship where you can bridge that conversation, but, we have to be honest to say that's not always the case. But I think minimally starting with, I have a situation here, I feel like I can get my job done, but I'm going to need, I would like to revisit my job schedule. To put that on the table. But if that doesn't go so well, I would encourage bridging to HR. But I'd like to switch to Richard because you had an optimal experience. And, I think most of us come in bringing our whole selves to work, and our supervisors are aware of our rich lives. So I think overwhelmingly people are going to meet you halfway. But I'd like to go beyond supervisors and say that it's practices that companies embrace at large. So by the time someone gets to their own particular situation, that there's a culture where, you're not going to be penalized if you do say, I need to have some special accommodations, or I need to step back temporarily. So Richard, I would turn it to you.
It's happened to me a lot, Jasmine. Thank you, Chris, as well. Is people have known for the last 6-7 years as I have started to speak more on caregiving, either for Embracing Carers, for instance, in that campaign, or AARP or Alzheimer's Association, is people will come up to me and say, I'm going through this dynamic too. How did you go through it, Richard? So I think that, the way it's addressed in business context, person to person is really great, obviously. And some of the spaces that I think we can explore that institutionally or organizationally is in the respective ERG or BRGs that are in the organization. If it's the disabilities ERG, if it is the women's network, if it is the military network, all of these are one step away, but not too far away from this idea of caregiving. And also another way to, I think, approach it, Chris, is to think of creating a caregiving subgroup. I've done that at 30 Rock, where I've approached the disabilities group to say, hey, why don't we start a sub ERG? And then if it gets enough interest, broaden it out. That might get a little frightening to some organizational leaders, only because then that might mean, what am I going to be asking for next in benefits? Well, it doesn't have to be that. Instead, it could just be a discussion, a safe place to talk. And so many people want to talk about it. So those are some of the things I went through personally, and is what I'm doing at 30 Rock to increase the conversation. And the support's been pretty good, if not great.
That's terrific. This next question is kind of a combination question from an audience member, from a couple of audience members. So one is, and Jasmine, EMD has done a terrific job of this. The question is really, how do we raise awareness, especially if you're not an employer, not a big employer? How do you raise awareness about the plight of caregivers and their needs? And then the secondary question that I think feeds into this for both of you would be, what are some kind of policy level solutions? You alluded to that a little bit in your presentation, but what are some of the policy level solutions that we might try to enact to help caregivers?
So, forgive me, reframe the first one again.
Sure. The first one was
I went to thinking about the policy solutions,
yeah,
that I fully lost track.
No, that's my bad. The first one is really, how do we raise awareness? Especially if you're not a big employer, you don't have a lot of resources. I think we have a lot of nonprofits on the webinar today, and they want to be part of this solution in terms of raising awareness. Yeah.
I mean, I think there's, Richard has a fantastic movie that could be an opportunity. We do movie once a month where we talk about things like that. So just trying to convene different activities, I think, is one avenue. So I'm trying to give a plug to Richard's opportunity there. But I would also say we in the company have leadership fully embrace and talk about their caregiving experience. We call it our purpose-driven ambassadors, just to have leadership give permission to speak about this issue. And when you say plight, it's like a double-edged sword, right? Just celebrating we talked about some of the unique assets and talents that people bring, but also just to say like, hey, I'm leaving at 2:00 today to go take care of my mom. I mean, not to keep that as this thing that we need to feel apologetic for, right? I'm going to go watch my daughter's soccer game, just trying to make it more, how do I say, part of the conversation. So others see, that you can be a fully participating at work, but also have other obligations, right? But the big thing too, I talked about that hidden element, that just making sure that caregivers aren't penalized. And so that's why I just talk about elevating and celebrating some of the special things that caregivers specifically do bring to work. Because I think often it's viewed as like, oh, that person's checked out a little bit because they have to travel or do this or that. Anyway, that's a long way on that one. I would turn it to Richard to see if there's anything he wants to add before I come in on the policy one that I was turning on.
Oh, really quickly, thank you, Jasmine. It's not deductive. Caregiving is not pull away all the time. In fact, it's additive to our lives. That it is a 1 + 1 = 3. And consider that conceptually and culturally, that it is possible for it to be greater, not less. And I think if we can talk about that way and express it that way, what is it that we gain, not that which we are losing in caregiving? And I personally believe it's additive for me personally in terms of who I am as a human over the last 7 years. And in the film, we try to show that these teens and 20-somethings are greater, not less, more amazing, not downtrodden, more energetic, not tired all the time. And I think that's culturally where we're trying to go, all of us in this call, in this gathering, and in this round table, believe and know, but we have to socialize that. All right, have fun with the policy, Jasmine.
You're like, throw that football back, right? And I would just add more compassionate, right? I think quite often we see that. But thank you. So on policy, I think that's, a longer road, a more complicated road, but a necessary road, right? We highlighted a few elements here. I was really surprised when you look at women and, again, communities of color. And again, I think this issue helps everybody. Minimally partnering with manufacturers around providing free personal protective equipment would be a fantastic first start, right? That should be the last thing that caregivers are worried about. But I think some of the longer term solutions, which I think there'll be fans and naysayers on this, and I understand it's complicated, but looking at, federal tax policy, tax credits, enhanced deductions, subsidy payments. I mean, those are just a few that I would put on the table right out of the gates. And I'm sure other people have other ideas.
That's great. Thank you. We just have a minute left. And one of the things I just wanted to wrap this segment by was because you were both engaged with the film, and it was amazing, Richard, was one of the young Hawaiian families that you profiled in the film Sky Blossom said that the Hawaiian word kuleana means responsibility. So I wondered if you would just talk a little bit about that and the impact that has on so many families, and especially the amazing young people.
Yeah, Chris, you picked one of my favorite words from the film. There are 5 families that we highlight. One of them is a Native Hawaiian family in Kauai, and he's 18 years old. He has a scholarship to go to school, and he decides instead to put off school and the scholarship to move in with his grandfather, who is a Korean War era vet, has early signs of Alzheimer's and dementia, and he moves his bed to sleep next to his grandfather. That's kuleana, right? Woo! And that is the inspiration all of these kids show, I think. And I think the idea of kuleana, that we all take on, it's a Hawaiian word, I had learned it only in filming, is what this roundtable is doing, right? Because we must look at caregiving. We must see why it is not only our responsibility, but something that is positive. And when Kaleo at 18, a young man, decides to do this, you really do believe that this generation of young caregivers, student caregivers, I do believe are truly the next greatest generation because of that very value.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Jasmine, for the data and sharing all the information. We will again provide those links to folks in the chat. We'll share access to the report. Thank you, Richard, for your passion and for joining us today. It is now my pleasure to welcome the next segment of our webinar today. So thank you both very much. And I would love to introduce my colleague, Sara Quist from Cigna Health. Sara is one of the people who has been shoulder to shoulder with us from the beginning. And we are thrilled that Cigna, among the many ways Cigna works to make a positive impact for the communities where they live and work, is focusing on unpaid caregivers as a top priority. So Sara, please take it away.
Thank you, Chris. What a beautiful session to hear from both of them. So thank you for that. Yeah, Cigna is, Mark alluded to it earlier, but we truly are proud to be a founding and core member of this coalition. And I will say equally proud of who we are as an organization and our commitment to family caregivers within our own workplace, offering benefits like paid caregiver leave, which also includes then a one-on-one coaching setup for that employee. And I have the privilege of co-leading the Generations ERG. So I just loved hearing Richard talk about the benefit of an ERG within a company, because I've seen that firsthand. We are one of 11 ERGs, but certainly, like he noted, have done joint events with the military ERG, the WIN ERG, the disability one, because we are all there to support one another going through those different challenges. So I make that note and to build on that, and even in some in the chat are commenting about their ERGs being the fastest growing, and we'll hear from one today, is that those are the moments that are going to help us break down that isolation in a very attainable way. I often get notes from employees that say, thank you, you do not know what that meant to me, meaning brought a speaker to life, brought a resource to bear. And those are the types of things that inspire and empower us truly to continue to support caregivers in our workplace. So now I'm excited to introduce 4 speakers who will briefly share how their organizations are supporting caregivers in their workplace. So of note, they're only going to be spending 5 minutes with their highlights. So of course, it's important to remember there are other things they are doing through flexible work schedules, benefits, and things beyond that. But today, we're hoping these practical examples are going to be something that you can take action in your organization as you look to support caregivers within your own workplace. Now, if you have questions for the speakers, please enter them in the chat and we'll get to them at the completion of the session. So first, I would like to introduce Jill McNamara. Jill is a Senior Director of Senior Care at Care.com. Her and her peers at Care.com have been part of the coalition since the early days, and we are so grateful for their expertise. Jill, please share with us how Care.com, a company started right here in Massachusetts, is supporting caregivers in your own workplace.
Thank you, Sara. As Sara mentioned, so I am a licensed social worker and work at Care.com, where I am fortunate to support working caregivers every day. And that includes our own internal employees. Now, this became all the more personal to me when my father suddenly had a stroke and a heart attack within a few months of each other. Suddenly, those employees who I was supporting through their own caregiving journeys, now I was experiencing those challenges firsthand. And we see 2 main challenges when we're talking about supporting caregiving employees in the workplace. First, employees typically don't self-identify as a caregiver. We see that taking mom to her medical appointments or cooking meals for dad are just part of our activities as the adult child and part of our responsibilities. And second, we see that employees are typically isolated in the workplace when it comes to adult and senior care. We don't often talk about how mom has dementia or how dad's incontinent, and those conversations need to change. And so because caregivers are often isolated, they're not self-identifying, they're typically not looking to their employer to provide supports for these caregiving challenges they're facing while also working. So what we see is that really creating a culture where we are recognizing that employees are balancing responsibilities outside of their day-to-day roles in their job is crucial now more than ever. And really creating this inclusive culture of care starts at the top. Companies and senior leaders need to recognize that it means identifying that these caregivers are facing challenges and it's impacting their workplace. And that highlighting that when there is a culture of inclusiveness and transparency and candidness, this allows caregiving employees to really address those issues head on. What I mean by that is having employers and leaders share their own personal experiences of caregiving. And that way, when you have an employee facing a similar challenge, they're not trying to hide it or thinking that their employer won't understand some of those challenges associated with those roles. So we really look to recognize that as we're supporting employees every day. And working at Care, this is a bit easier because we're having those caregiving conversations every day by supporting caregivers. But we also recognize that there's no cookie cutter approach or solution when we're talking about supports. So we're looking for a personalized approach for each of these employees. Things, as Sara mentioned, we're looking at flexible workplace arrangements and schedules. Maybe we are looking at what are the time off options for that particular employee, and making sure that those employees have access to workplace benefits and know what those benefits are. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the benefits that we do offer to our own employees, as well as offer externally to other companies as well. And so through this, we allow our employees to have access to this care.com platform, which allows them to find caregivers, whether this be childcare, pet care, tutors, as well as adult and senior care. In addition to finding caregivers, we also provide adult and child backup care. For those situations where maybe that regular care is unavailable, employees can have a certain amount of days where they'll have subsidized care to support them in those situations. We see a lot of our own employees taking advantage of our Senior Care Solutions program. This is where we connect an employee with a master's level social worker to really guide them step by step every way through the process of what they need to know and put resources in place to take care of their aging loved ones. What we see is that the field of senior care can be so foreign and complex to most people, so having that personalized guide can really save employees significant time, as well as really provide that reassurance that they're making the right decisions regardless of where they are in that caregiving journey. And for employees who maybe don't have the time to go through and find those caregivers on their own, we have an expert assistance program that our employees can leverage, where specialists can actually find those caregivers on our platform for them. So in addition to workplace benefits, I know Sara touched upon some employee resource groups. And what we've recognized in our company is that we have this population of caregivers, and how do they connect with one another to share experiences, stories, and resources? We actually facilitate caregiver support groups at a number of employer locations. And as a result, we're looking to launch our own caregiver ERG early in 2021 as an additional support to our own employees. So really, we know that caregiving is always going to be an emotional experience. And so we try to take this personalized approach for our employees to really ensure that the focus of this emotional time is at that relationship level of the family and not at the career level of our employees.
Great. Thank you, Jill.
Thanks, Sara.
I so appreciate it. And next, I want to welcome Ronnie Mae Weiss. She is the Senior Manager of the Center for Work Life and Wellbeing at MIT. Now, of course, we all know MIT is educating the next generation of leaders, but it takes a vast group of staff and faculty to help make that happen. And so I'll turn it over to Ronnie May to talk about how she supports that group.
Great. Thank you, Sara. And thank you all. The earlier presentation reminded me of something very important. We do have a significant senior care support for all of our employees. Many universities have many boomers, as well as, of course, many students. And we had found that our university campus did need an extensive support for caring for aging relatives. So we do have senior care advising, and we have backup adult care. We have seminars on sort of the legal aspects of aging, as well as the financial aspects of aging. We do that regularly. But what was interesting is that we used to do these, some webinars, but a lot seminars. And we had a lot of millennials and a lot of Gen Xers coming to those seminars, as well as boomers. And then we did some focus groups. And what we learned is that many of our employees who were millennials and Gen Xers the millennials were helping their parents. They were using this benefit to help their parents care for their grandparents, and Gen Xers as well. So what we realized is that oftentimes in our companies and in our university, we just look in a narrow way in terms of communication. So, we have senior care advising, we have backup adult care, we have all of these seminars and webinars on the aspects of aging and caregiving for your aging relative. But, we should be marketing this to our millennials also. So now we really have changed, and we do market and communicate all of the senior care and adult care benefits to all age groups, because for our millennials, they've told us it makes them feel like their workplace, MIT, cares about them, and they can help their parents care for their grandparents. So I just wanted to bring that back to what you were saying earlier, because it is very real. And I think oftentimes we just have lenses of who to communicate which resources and benefits to. And this is one that really spans across all the generations. So just wanted to highlight that. I was asked to speak about what MIT does to support our new parents with paid leave. And we all know in Massachusetts that as of January 1st, which is really close, there's going to be a new Massachusetts Paid Family and Medical Leave Act. And so our policies will change. The beauty of this new Medical Leave and Family Paid Leave Act is that it includes caring for all of our family members. So that is going to be, that's going to be great, I think, for all of us in Massachusetts. It means that people who are caring for their aging family members, their spouses or partners, and their children will have paid leave. So, but I wanted to highlight two things that we've been doing at MIT, which we feel really strongly about. During those early weeks and months when our employees are out on maternity leave, we did enhance our maternity leave. So now everybody has 20 days. So if you are the birth mother, you have your 8 weeks of maternity leave. And then on top of that, there's 20 days of paid parental leave. The paid parental leave is for the birth parent, as well as fathers or adoptees or the non-birth parent, and also parents through surrogacy. We've tried to be very inclusive and include everyone in that. But what we've also found is people are alone. You know, many of our employees are from all over the world and they don't have family support. So what happens is when our employees have their babies, they get a care package from our Center for Work Life and Wellbeing at MIT. It has a little onesie, which you see, an MIT onesie. At first we did it at 6 months, but babies were growing quickly. So now we send a 12-month onesie. We learned that was probably better because babies are born in different sizes. But what we do there is right there, and then we let them know about all the resources that are available to them. Finding quality childcare, support for any anxiety or stress, parent coaching, all the resources that are available to them at no cost. So we're really happy with that program, and it really helps people. They have a contact when they're coming back to work. They have someone to speak with to help them coach them back to the workplace. And the last thing I wanted to say is that we have many, many different vendors supporting our different needs of our employees. But one thing we do very seriously is we connect them so that if someone is speaking with a senior care counselor, or they're speaking to a college coach counselor, there's always a thought, oh, is this person in serious distress, anxiety, depression? I will connect them to the MIT Employee Assistance Program, where I've met the counselors and I know them. So there's a lot of soft referrals back and forth. And I think in this caregiving business that we're all in, or in understanding how to support caregivers now, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic, people are isolated. And there are high degrees of depression and stress and anxiety. And one thing I will say is there's a new report that just came out only a week ago, which was the McKinsey report on women in the workplace. And in terms of COVID-19, what it says is employees say their biggest challenges during COVID-19 are burnout, mental health, childcare, and or homeschooling responsibilities, and physical and mental health of loved ones, and then financial insecurity. So this area of burnout, of stress, of depression is very serious for all of our employee populations. And so we're taking extra care right now to remind all of our employees that this kind of free mental health counseling and support is available to them. Thanks.
That is so wonderful, Ronnie Mae, and wholeheartedly agree with you. We need to look at the whole person when we're looking to support caregivers. So thank you for everything you shared today. So next, I would like to introduce and welcome Kristin Daughter to turn on her camera and microphone. Kristin is coming to us from Sanofi. In her day job, Kristin is a vaccines medical program leader, but she volunteers her time, talent, and treasure as the North American regional lead for their Caregive Employee Resource Group, or ERG. So Kristin, we're so excited to hear from you on how you and your colleagues support one another as caregivers through the ERG. Thank you.
Thank you, Sara. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today and share my experiences with the Caregive ERG. Before I jump into it, I would like to take a minute and challenge you to think about a time in your life when things are going along smoothly, your work life, your personal life, your family life, everything that happens in your life was going along, so to speak, as a well-oiled machine. And then something happens. And just like that, there's an event in your life and you have to rehash basically everything that you consider normal. Now, the cheat here is that you could really use the COVID-19 situation from this year as your illustration. But what I'm getting you to think about is, this is what often happens when a lot of us become caregivers, is literally life shifts on its axis overnight. One day we're going along, life is normal, obviously we're busy and we have a lot of obligations, but we're able to manage everything rather smoothly. And then we have a life event that happens. And the next day you wake up and suddenly you are in the role of a caregiver. And this comes with obviously a lot of obligations, usually more questions than answers. And for me personally, it was difficult to start the journey because I felt very alone in the journey. It was something I'd never experienced before. About 5 years ago, my mom was diagnosed with dementia, and suddenly I became a caregiver. And as I said, there's usually more questions than answers. And it's a difficult journey to start venturing on, especially in the early days. Fortunately for me, I've spent my entire 5 years working at Sanofi since becoming a caregiver. And Sanofi has given me a lot of opportunities to support me as a caregiver. First and foremost, we do have some very significant pieces of our benefits package. We do have 10 paid caregiver leave days per year covered under FMLA. We have subsidized backup child and elder care and free access to a care coach that assists with elder care needs. So obviously the benefits package is very robust. And then Sanofi goes a step further and they've created the Caregive ERG. So there are about a dozen ERGs at Sanofi, and Caregive being one of somewhat newer ones, but it has been in existence at least the 5 years that I've been a caregiver. And Sanofi's Caregive is an employee resource group that provides its members with peer support and access to practical information and resources they can fit into their lives, where members are part of a safe and comfortable community, where they are more informed and confident to make caregiving decisions, where they feel more balanced and whole because they recognize the importance of making time for self-care. So obviously, if you listen to the words there, that's a tall order. It's obviously a very grand mission that we're trying to accomplish with the Caregive ERG. So to boil it down a little bit, about a year ago, I stepped into the regional lead position across North America for the Caregive ERG. And to date, we have about 400 members company-wide. So how are we accomplishing the mission? How are we taking that mission and putting it into action? And the way that I've done that is really by instituting member surveys. So routinely, about twice annually, we do a member survey. And the goal of that survey is really twofold. It's one, to get a feel for where are our members at right now? How are they feeling? What are they dealing with? What's going on in their lives? Just really, kind of pull the audience and see where everyone's at mentally. And then the other piece of it is to really understand the needs of those Caregive ERG members and to understand, what kind of resources they need right now and in the coming months to support them to be successful on their caregiving journey. Once we gather that information, right now, actually, we are in the annual planning cycle for the upcoming calendar year. And what we're doing is we're taking that information from that survey and we're developing a program for next year. That program will include monthly webinars, talks, whatever, where we bring in both internal and external partners, depending on the needs and what we're trying to accomplish in that discussion. For instance, we may have someone from our internal HR come and talk to our members about the benefits and practically how to use the benefits if they're struggling to use the benefits. We also bring in external speakers, such as we have a great partnership with the United Way Caregivers Coalition in New Jersey. They've provided us a number of speakers in this past year and years prior. So we will set up those monthly programs based on the needs of our members. We will also provide them with links to external offerings, such as today's webinar. We obviously shared that with our membership. And we also take coffee breaks. So just an informal monthly meeting where folks can join on the call and share their experiences and their issues at the time. And obviously, we also provide access to resources and external partners and agencies. Finally, the last piece of it is really building our community. And this year has obviously presented many challenges with COVID-19 coming into the picture. We basically had to go 100% virtual with our programming, which was easy from the webinar aspect. It's difficult from the aspect of getting people together and making them feel connected or helping them feel connected. We've done that really in two ways this year. We've created a Yammer community. So we do have an active Yammer page, and we share all of our programming and our updates and our external partner information via that Yammer page. But that Yammer page also acts as a community and a forum to allow our members at any time, real time, live. They can go in that Yammer community, they can share a post, and they can start a conversation about anything that's going on in their lives. It is a private community, so only Caregive ERG members are invited to attend that community. And that way it gives them a safe space to connect. We've also taken the virtual coffee breaks. That's been something new that we added this year since the COVID-19 situation, and we've all been isolated to our homes. About once a month, we do get on a very short 15 to 30-minute call to just let our members share. In fact, we had one earlier today, and it was a great experience to just share about where everyone's at in their lives right now, what they're dealing with, and it gives members an opportunity to connect on issues that they may need a little bit of support in, or even just an ear to listen. And then once we get back together, of course, we will continue to resume our in-person meetings, which is a great opportunity. When we meet face-to-face in the workplace, what it allows is an opportunity for our members to interact face-to-face, and then oftentimes they'll join each other for lunch or a coffee break on their own outside of the Caregive community and continue to support each other on their journey. So really, ultimately, the goal of our ERG is helping caregivers feel connected and comfortable. And everything I've talked about today is how we really aim to achieve that goal. And again, thank you for allowing me to bring light to what the ERG does and how we are able to support our caregivers in the workforce. If you currently don't have an ERG at your organization, I recommend that it's something really outstanding to support your caregivers.
Kristin, thank you so much for sharing your story and also for sharing what you're doing at Sanofi. I will echo for what you noted about having those coffee conversations. We often have a monthly conversation within our ERG, no agenda, no external speaker, just getting people together. And it's amazing what that does for folks to kind of just bring their latest challenge to the table and find support in others. So, so pleased to see that you're doing that as well. And thanks again for sharing everything you're doing there. And finally, I am pleased to introduce Anthony Jarusinski, Manager of Benefits at American Eagle. Now, I'm proud to say that Anthony is here not only to share the great work that he's doing within his organization to support caregivers, he is the most recent new member of our coalition. So Anthony, thank you for all you do to support caregivers, and I'll hand it over to you.
No, thank you, Sara. And, I couldn't be more honored when, you and the Cigna team asked me to present with the coalition today, and, couldn't be more proud of, our great organization joining the great coalition that is the Massachusetts Caregiving Coalition. So super excited on both ends there, but, I don't have a slide deck here, and I just want to kind of walk you all through kind of our journey here at American Eagle Outfitters and how we approach and view caregiving. So for those of you that don't know, and for those of you that missed the joke at the onset about getting coupons in our mailbox for American Eagle Outfitters, but American Eagle Outfitters is a leading global specialty teen retailer. We're headquartered in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So being a Pennsylvanian and residing here in Pittsburgh, I appreciate the kind folks of Massachusetts allowing me to join today. We operate over 1,000 stores across North America. So we have a very strong presence in Massachusetts, and we operate 30 stores there between our American Eagle and Aerie brands. So for those of you on this call, you're probably thinking, why is American Eagle presenting on something that can have to do with senior care or elder care? Our population is a heavy millennial and Gen Z population. We have about 5,000, full-time benefit eligible associates. So that's who we kind of do caregiving programs to of what we do. Average age enrolled in those benefits is 35. You peel the onion back a little bit further and you start thinking of our store population. Our average age as an entire organization is a little closer to like 29, 30 years old. So heavy millennial and Gen Z workforce. We do have our boomers. We have our, Gen Xers. So we do have a lot of individuals that, you could think of, I guess, the stereotype caregiver. And I'm going to talk to you today about kind of our two-pronged approach. And it kind of started with the parental side of it and, kind of transitioned into elder care. A heavy, millennial population. So we have a lot of, new moms that are giving birth. Average age enrolled is 35 years old. We are predominantly female workforce at 80%. So we always joke there's something in the water at American Eagle, but we kind of had this problem to solve for with parental benefits. And that's where our journey started in 2017. We founded an ERG, which was called Real Moms. American Eagle is an inclusive organization that believes there is real power in the optimism of youth. So we throw the word real around a lot, but I think, and I'm biased, but I think we are an authentic, real organization. And if you look at our marketing and if you look at our stores, I mean, we are an inclusive brand of all sizes, of all genders, and of all ethnicities. So, you know, I feel very strongly that we are real. So with our inclusivity, real moms, and I was the first honorary dad on that ERG, but we have evolved into becoming the real parents group. So this ERG, we meet bi-weekly, and we knew that we had to kind of solve for a problem with, you know, paid parental leave and, you know, maternity benefits. And now we partner with BumpBox and Progeny and Ovia, and kind of solve that, you know, new mom, new parent thing. We have paid parental leave. We give either 2 or 4 weeks to new moms and new dads, you know, an inclusive benefit for, you know, 2 dads that adopt, 2 moms that adopt, adoption, you know, normal, you know, birth and so forth. So we kind of solve for that problem. But let's fast forward to 2019. I mean, the Real Moms ERG or Real Parents ERG kind of existed, but we shifted our focus when Cigna came along and said, you know, hey, Anthony, would you be interested in participating in a pilot program through their caregiving leave? And I said, well, you know, absolutely. And we did a ton of promotion, postcards, mailers, flyers, you name it. But what really resonated with me was before the pandemic, we had on-site lunch and learns. And in this group, I mean, I sat in these presentations and I'm like, wow, I wonder if this is going to resonate with people. I wonder if people are going to say, hey, this speaks to me. And I was blown away because you wouldn't believe how many individuals that we have in that sandwich generation. And what a sandwich generation means is it's usually anyone from the age of 30 to 40. You could cheat a little bit on the bottom end and the high end to get into the high 20s and low 40s. But these are individuals that are caring for their parents and are caring for their young children. And that is our niche. We have a heavy millennial workforce, and that's kind of where those 30 to 40-year-olds are that truly have this caregiving need, caring for young children at home and caring for their parents. Maybe their parents even live with them. So, you know, you ask yourself, why American Eagle, this young population, why would they need caregiving? And we had such great engagement with the caregiving program with Cigna in 2019. So let's fast forward here with respect to time. And we look at 2020 and we're going to build off this caregiving program with Cigna. We're going to use their partner Vela to have this platform for our associates to engage with. We're going to have incentives through our well-being program, and a pandemic hits us. We were having conversations here at American Eagle about increasing our paid parental leave. Those conversations shifted from paid parental leave to what do we do with this pandemic? And we have a lot of parents. We have children, their schools are closing, they're not at school. And so this kind of evolved into strengthening that Cigna and Vela partnership, and then even getting a brand new partner. So Jill spoke with Care.com, but we introduced the Care at Work program here at American Eagle in September because there was a real need of, you know, what are we going to do for backup care or in-center emergency care? And we want to approach this holistically. We want to take care of the new moms, the new dads, but then we also want to take care of the elder care. And we haven't evolved to a state where we have a paid caregiving leave yet. I mean, that could be a little bit further down the road. The main reason for the Care at Work program being implemented is it was mostly for childcare, but looking at our data and metrics before I even presented today, you know, 61% of the people that have engaged with Care at Work are looking for childcare, but 10% are looking for senior care and elder care. So it's very real in our organization. Our associates have been self-identifying. We have the Cigna caregiving questions built into our health assessment. So, you know, you get these questions asked of you on this health assessment, and you might not even realize that you are a caregiver, that you're doing something for maybe an elder parent or for a grandparent, and you just kind of do it as a normal walk of life, and you're not thinking that you may need the help. You may need to engage in a program, you know, such as this. We have 115 year-to-date referrals to our caregiving program, which is low, but we are capturing these folks that are going out on FMLA, that are completing the health assessment, engaging with our on-site health coaches. So I know we only have about 5 minutes or so I did want to respect your time, but we have had this great movement and evolution of caregiving here at American Eagle. And it's only going to get stronger and better as we look to strengthen our paid parental leave benefits. We're a nationwide retailer. So, you know, for those other, you know, employers, you know, MIT spoke before about the Massachusetts paid family leave, that I have to deal with that. I have to deal with New York paid family leave, California paid family leave. And it's almost to a point now where we're reactive because there's the lack of this nationwide paid family leave or paid caregiving leave. So we have to keep putting out fires here at American Eagle for these various cities and states where we have our stores and distribution centers that have these new paid family leaves too. So I am longing for the day where there's a blanket solve similar to 93 when we had the FMLA approved. So we will see, but in the time being, we're going to do some things internally here at American Eagle, but also kind of react to what's happened, nationally and within these various city, states, and jurisdictions. So again, I appreciate all of your time today and listening. And I hope my 5-minute commercial for what American Eagle is doing has had an impact on you all. So thanks again, and off to you, Sara.
Anthony, thank you so much for sharing. And absolutely, I think you're echoing what was said earlier today, is that there is potentially a stereotype or an unknown that millennials and Gen Z and Gen X are very much caregivers right now. And we need to make sure that we're taking care of our entire population and identifying them as such. So thank you for sharing today. All right,
Absolutely.
Of course. So now we will move into the final portion of our event. So as Chris mentioned earlier, this coalition is a collaboration between public and private organizations. And I'd like to introduce you to two of the most passionate and dedicated public sector members that I've had the privilege to be alongside since day one, literally, of this coalition. Laurance Stuntz is the director of the Mass eHealth Institute at the Massachusetts Tech Collaborative. And Kathryn Downs is the Director of Policy as the Massachusetts Executive Office of Elder Affairs. So I'll hand it over to Laurance and Kathryn, who's going to help us understand what it means to be a member of this coalition. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sara. And thank you to all the amazing speakers who went before Laurance in my segment. So we're going to talk to you today a little bit from the public sector perspective, and I'll start, and then I think Laurance will carry on in terms of sort of the MeHI perspective and more information about the coalition. So I wanted to speak as one of the agencies that sits under this umbrella of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Office of Health and Human Services. How do we see this issue as both a policymaker, which is definitely a unique hat that we wear as a member of the coalition, but also as an employer? I love the way that Richard and Jasmine talked about how their organizations have really walked the talk. So I'm hoping to share a couple of stories with you today about what EOEA has done in particular in that space. So as a policymaker, our mission at the agency is to both empower and support the well-being of older adults and their families, which includes caregivers across the Commonwealth. Strengthening supports and meeting caregivers where they are, which includes in the workplace. Today, that means at home. It might be also in another physical setting, is really a priority of Governor Baker's Council to Address Aging, which is now in year 2 of its implementation. And I think my colleague Molly Evans will drop a little bit more information in the chat if you're interested in understanding more about the report and recommendations that were published in 2018. But I mentioned the council in the sense that the work of that group, which is 26 different organizations and members representing public-private collaboration, that was really one of the many, many bricks in the foundation of founding this coalition. And we're really proud members of that group. And I think that one of the things that the council has done for us in such a strong way is really elevated the role of family caregivers and also the strategies that the state is taking to support caregivers across the Commonwealth. And I'm excited to share as an example that in 2021, we'll actually be including caregiving census as part of a public health survey that is commissioned by the Department of Public Health here in Massachusetts, but is sponsored by the federal CDC at large. And I think Jasmine alluded to this earlier in her presentation that you can't manage what you can't measure. And so this is a really important first step for us as policymakers in the Commonwealth to understand both the prevalence of caregiving and the needs of caregivers across all 351 cities and towns. But of course, like I mentioned before, we are a proud member of the coalition, not only as a policymaker, but as an employer. And so I wanted to share 2 examples of things that we've done in the last year that I think are really significant, but dare I say easy steps that I'm hoping will inspire other folks who are on this call. And the first is similar to some of the conversation around ERGs. We launched a lunch and learn within Health and Human Services focused on employees who are also caregiving across the lifespan, whether that's traditional childcare or caring for an aging parent, caring for a spouse with a serious illness diagnosis. So we launch these, 1 hour, once a month forums as both a way to share information. A lot of times folks don't even know about the state programs and resources available to them, though we all work for the state. But also as part support group. And one of the things that's been really inspiring as I've facilitated those sessions each month for the past 2 years is to see that, yes, the information, the resources are incredibly impactful and empowering, but also, creating that space, that safe space to share is critically important. I had a colleague of mine, privately email me saying, even though the topic might not have been something I was interested in, so I didn't really speak up at the session, thank you, because this is my 1 hour a month where I get to be me as a caregiver, and this is my form of respite and self-care. I leave work at 5 and I go home to do my second job, which is to be a caregiver for my family member. And another example that I wanted to share, just in terms of kind of walking the talk, is actually something that we did this past Monday in collaboration with Archangels, who is another founding member of the Caregiver Coalition. So Alex and Sara from Archangels were our kind of guest speakers, and we decided to take our traditional all-staff meeting and totally flip the script on the agenda, do something a little out of the box. We usually talk about, of course, things that impact the members of the Commonwealth. We don't do a lot of reflecting inwards about how our employees are doing. And we invited them to talk about their caregiver intensity index and encouraged everyone before joining the session to actually get their score and to take the survey, anonymized, of course. And it was really interesting because, again, that created this kind of culture shift and signal that, yes, we are here as professionals thinking about caregivers, but we ourselves are also in many instances caregivers. And doing that intensity index survey gave us a common language to have a discussion and really reflect. And I thought it was really powerful that, by the end of the 1 hour that we spent together, a colleague was brave enough to share her own story of how difficult she was finding an experience caregiving for her parents from a distance. And a lot of people, this is over Zoom, a lot of people just pinged in the chat, thank you so much for sharing. I'm going through something similar, cheering with the clapping emojis, and being vulnerable and bringing your stories into the workplace like that and having an employer create that safe space is just so incredibly important. So before I transition to Laurance, I just want to emphasize that I think the main message I'm trying to convey in terms of some of the steps that we've taken at EOEA is to say that the little things really matter. And so sometimes it's difficult to know where to start. I think something that we can all do, given that Thanksgiving's around the corner, and it's easy, is just to say thank you to your workforce. Thank you to the people who are going home to do that second job. Say, I love Jasmine quoted someone who actually completed the survey, and the report is, I see you, I hear you, and I support you, and I thank you. I think that, yes, we've had so much discussion on this call today about what, employees and workers can do to elevate the conversation and to be proactive in having these discussions with management. But we as leaders on this call, I think, can all create that safe space. And this is a really easy thing to do. So with that, I wanted to turn it over to Laurance to talk a little bit more about the Caregiver Coalition and to really encourage everyone who's joined us today to think about joining, because one of the things that we at the state say many, many times is, something like family caregiving and supporting people in the workplace is an issue that will take all of us collectively together. I think Richard Louis had said 1 + 1 = 3. I think that is so true in the context of an issue like caregiving. So I really encourage you to learn more about the coalition and to join us. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathryn. It's been great working with you and with the Elder Affairs team over the past year. We look forward to continuing supporting this mission over the coming years. So it's been really interesting and encouraging to hear from all the different employers in different industries, different constraints about the ways they've found to support family caregivers in their workforce. Now we want to hear from you. So we're going to launch a couple of polls to get your opinion about the types of support that will really help get people involved and into the, and help keep people in the workforce and the activities that employers should start with on this journey. And additionally, we want to hear directly from HR professionals about your plans and the impact of caregiving benefits. So we have a second poll just for you that will launch after the first one. And if your answers aren't on the list, please just post them in the chat and we can capture your comments that way. To introduce myself, my name is Laurance Stuntz. I'm the director of the Massachusetts eHealth Institute at the MassTech Collaborative. And MassTech is a state economic development agency, and the eHealth Institute that I lead focuses on growing the digital health cluster here in Massachusetts and supporting innovative use of digital health technology. About a year ago, we formally launched the coalition in partnership with Archangel, Cigna, EMD Serono, many of the Care.com, the Executive Office, and the Mass Business Roundtable, along with Senior Link and others. But we've been working on this concept for a while before this, mostly because we were struck by the human impact of caregiving in terms of its impact on the mental, physical, and financial health of caregivers. We were also struck by the economic impact on caregivers themselves, as well as for their employers. So I won't go into too much detail, but one of the things that came in a Harvard Business Review paper called The Caring Company pointed out that employers grossly underestimate both the direct and indirect costs of caregiving. Their survey showed that 32% of employees had left a job due to caregiving responsibilities, and that higher titled and more responsible employers are the most likely to be affected by this. And over the past 8 months, the impact of the COVID-19 public health crisis has only increased the caregiving responsibilities of our employees. And as Jasmine mentioned earlier, this burden has fallen disproportionately on the shoulders of women. According to a National Women's Law Center analysis, between August and September, so just over a couple of months, nearly 1.1 million workers aged 20 and over dropped out of the labor force. And of those workers, 80% or 865,000 were women. So now more than ever, we need to do everything we can to recognize, honor, and support family caregivers we all work with. And employers have a big role in that effort. So I'm here today to ask all of you to join us in the Massachusetts Caregiver Coalition. We have a really simple vision and mission. I'll put it up on the screen here. Looks like behind the poll, but our mission is to work with employers to increase awareness of and support for the more than 1 million unpaid family caregivers in the Commonwealth, and ensure that all employers have the tools necessary to recognize, honor, and support their caregivers. Our vision is that every employer, regardless of where they are, actively works to recognize, honor, and support the family caregivers in their workforce. So what does that mean for an employer? Well, first of all, we want you to join us, and there's no cost to that. It's a pretty simple model where coalition members do three things. First, they endorse the mission and vision of the coalition in a public way. That could mean listing yourselves on our website. It could mean listing it in your employee benefit guides. Second, you educate your employees. You educate your employees about resources that are available to them. I was particularly struck by a Bank of America study recently that showed that 88% of employers offer some sort of support for family caregivers, but only 29% of employees are actually aware of those benefits. Also, make sure that your managers are well educated about the pressures and risks of caregiving to increase their level of empathy for caregivers. And finally, empower your team members. All of us should be working in the ways that we can to helping team members support caregivers. And with that small investment of human capital and empathy, employers can join us as we work together on all of this. So members get to learn more about how family caregiving impacts your employees and affects your bottom line. Members get access to resources like the Employer Toolkit, peers, and like-minded companies. You can learn more about actions other employers are taking to support and retain their caregiving employees. It can develop long-term strategies around retention and workforce diversity and inclusion. Additionally, and a little plug for the work that we at MassTech are doing more broadly around caregiving, we're thinking about caregivers and caregiving outside the workforce as well. We're working to develop programming to support caregivers in their communities and highlighting innovation and tools that support caregivers and care recipients of all ages and abilities. So we're putting together a series of innovation webinars and discussions about ways that we can all work to support caregivers. And members of the coalition are invited and encouraged to participate in that work as well. So I know that we are almost out of time. I'll pause briefly to see if there are any key questions about members. I'll look also at the chat. And it looks like, well, there's a couple of questions. One was, will the poll results be shared as well? Yeah, as part of a follow-up to this webinar, we will share out some of the results of the polls. I'm curious to see what they turned out as well. If you do have questions about joining the coalition, you can find us at macaregivercoalition.org. As Paul posted in the chat, you can also you can email info@macaregivercoalition.org. I want to thank all of the speakers today. Mark at Cigna for your leadership in helping raise the profile of this issue with the employer community. Richard at MSNBC for your empathy and support of caregivers and telling their stories. Jasmine for your work with EMD Serono to really dig into the data about the impact of caregiving. And Jill, Ronnie, Kristin, and Anthony for highlighting the work that your companies do to support caregivers. Kathryn, for your partnership and the state's partnership in this important effort, and to all the coalition's founding members and organizers of today's webinar, and particularly to the members of the Mass Business Roundtable and Cigna teams for helping pull all this together and ensure we had a great event today. Paul, Judy, Chris, Sara, this wouldn't have happened without you. So as we close down this webinar, you'll see a post-webinar survey. Please do take 2 minutes to fill that out right now to give us feedback on today's event and help guide us as we grow and expand the coalition. And reach out to us directly. We want to hear from you. Thank you very much for participating today. And thanks for all of your time.